My fingers found the ring before my brain caught up. Not mine, not the one I'd been saving for, hidden in a sock drawer 3 states away in my own apartment. This one was cold, heavier than it looked, and it was sitting at the bottom of Sophie's jewelry box like it had always belonged there. I was 29. Her name was Sophie. We'd been together 4 years, and 20 minutes earlier, I'd let myself into her apartment with the key she gave me 18 months ago for one reason. I needed her ring size. She was at brunch with her sister. I had maybe 40 minutes. I want you to understand what kind of morning this was supposed to be. I was down on one knee in my own head the whole drive over. I'd already talked to her father. I'd already picked the restaurant. This wasn't snooping. This was the most trusting thing I had ever done, reaching into a woman's private things because I was about to ask her to spend her life with me. That's the part that still gets me. I wasn't looking for anything wrong. I was looking for a number. I found a stranger's ring instead. It was a man's band, gold, engraved on the inside, small script, the kind you have to tilt toward the light to read. 2 initials, not mine, a date 4 months back. I stood there in her bedroom holding a ring that wasn't mine in the pocket of the jacket where my ring, hers, the one I'd chosen, was already folded into a felt box, warm from being close to my body all morning. For a second, I told myself something simple, a family piece, her grandfather's. She has a brother, doesn't she? No, I knew her brother's ring. I'd seen it at Christmas. This wasn't that. I want to back up because this didn't start in a jewelry box. It started months before in small withdrawals I talked myself out of noticing. Sophie used to fall asleep with her hand flat on my chest like she was checking I was still breathing. Somewhere around the winter, she started sleeping at the edge of the bed, instead curled toward the wall. She started taking calls in the hallway. She'd come back in, set her phone face down, and ask what I wanted for dinner. And I'd answer her like the conversation was normal because I wanted it to be normal so badly that I built the normal myself out of nothing, out of hope. I told myself she was stressed at work. I told myself a proposal would fix whatever this was, and that once she had the certainty of me, choosing me out loud in front of people, the drifting would stop. I didn't ask her what was wrong. I went and bought a ring instead. I think some part of me knew that a question might get an answer I couldn't use, and a ring felt like an answer I could give her so I wouldn't have to hear hers. That's mine. I built a future and mailed it to her without checking if she still lived at that address. Back in her bedroom, I turned the ring over twice. The engraving caught the window light. I told myself it was nothing 3 more times before I put it in my pocket next to the one I'd brought for her and drove home with both of them touching through the fabric, and I did not feel like a man about to propose. I felt like a man carrying evidence. I didn't confront her that week. I want to be clear about why. It wasn't strategy, it was fear. If I said the words out loud, I couldn't take them back, and some sick, hopeful animal part of me still wanted the version where I was wrong, so I watched instead. I noticed the hallway calls got longer. I noticed she'd started saying we about plans I wasn't part of, then catching herself. I noticed a receipt in her car for a jeweler 2 towns over, a repair, engraving touch-up, dated the same week as the ring's inscription. 3 weeks in, I finally asked her outright whose ring it was. She didn't lie the way I expected. She didn't reach for a story. She just went very pale and said, "How long have you had that?" Not, "What ring?" Not, "I don't know what you mean." "How long have you had that?" Like the ring was a hostage and she needed to know how much time she had left. Here's where it stopped being the story I thought I was in. There wasn't another man on the side. There was another future on the side. His name was Adam. He worked with her sister's husband. They'd been building toward the same milestone I was, toward marriage. For nearly the same stretch of months, I'd been quietly shopping for rings. The engraving on his ring wasn't some secret token. It was the date he'd asked her to pick a life with him. She hadn't picked yet. That was the whole horror of it. She hadn't chosen Adam over me or me over Adam. She'd let both of us walk toward the same door at the same time. And she'd been standing in the middle of it for months, unable to move either direction because moving meant losing whichever version of her life she didn't choose. So she chose neither out loud and both in private. She let two men build houses on the same piece of land. I remember my whole chest went hot and then completely cold, like something had been unplugged. I asked her, stupidly, if she loved him. She said, I don't know how to answer that without it being a lie either way. And here's the thing about Sophie I need you to hold on to, because she was never some cartoon villain gliding between two men for sport. She was terrified. She told me once back in year 2 that her parents divorced because her mother chose wrong and then spent 30 years proving she hadn't. At the time, I thought it was just a sad story about her childhood. Now I understood it was a warning she'd given me about herself. And I hadn't been listening. She wasn't choosing between two men. She was trying to avoid ever finding out she'd chosen wrong by refusing to choose at all. That doesn't make it forgivable. It makes it human, which is worse somehow, because you can't hate a person cleanly when you understand exactly why they broke. The middle of that conversation is a blur, honestly, but one thing sharpened everything back into focus. Her sister called partway through, timing so bad it felt engineered by the universe, and Sophie put her on speaker without thinking, distracted. Her sister's voice came through bright and easy. Hey, did Luke finally do it? Adam said you two were basically engaged the way you talk about the future. Silence on our end. Her sister, still cheerful, oblivious. Whichever one, honestly, you'll be happy either way. Sophie's hand found the phone and ended the call so fast it slipped and hit the carpet. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Her sister had just said out loud, without knowing it, the sentence Sophie had spent months not saying to either of us, that we were interchangeable futures to her, two doors she kept both propped open. I sat with that a long time, not calm. My jaw was doing something I couldn't stop, this tight ache from clenching it without noticing, and my hands wouldn't hold still. I kept turning my own ring box over and over in my pocket like a worry stone, like if I held it tight enough, it would turn back into the future I'd planned that morning. Here's the question I still can't put down. If nothing physical ever happened, if she never touched him, is it still a betrayal to keep two people orbiting you because you can't stand to lose either light? Or is that just what fear looks like when it runs out of road? I don't think the answer changes what it cost me. I think it might change what it cost her. And I'm not sure that's my job to decide anymore. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I took the ring, his ring, the one that started all this, out of my pocket and set it on her kitchen counter gently, like it was something that could still shatter. Then I did the harder thing. I took out mine. I didn't destroy it. I didn't pawn it in some dramatic gesture I'd regret in a parking lot an hour later. I drove it to my sister's place that night and gave it to her for safekeeping because some part of me, a part I don't fully understand yet, wasn't ready to decide what that ring meant now that it wasn't going to mean what I'd built it to mean. It just sat in her jewelry box instead of Sophie's, waiting for me to become a person who knew what he wanted it to say. 6 weeks later, I took it back, not to propose to anyone. I had it melted down and reset into a plain band I wear on my right hand now. Not a promise to another person, just a promise that the next time I hand someone my future, I'll ask what she's holding first. So here's what I keep coming back to, and maybe you've lived some version of this too, not with rings, maybe with something else you found while doing the most loving thing you knew how to do. Would you rather find out you were chosen wrong or find out you were never really chosen at all? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone.